Good afternoon and welcome to the latest Number 10 press conference. I'm very pleased to be joined by Jonathan Van Tam, Deputy Chief Medical Officer, and Simon Stevens, Chief Executive of NHS England. It is almost a year since humanity has been tormented by COVID. Across the world, economic output has plummeted and 1.5 million people have died. All the time, we've been waiting and hoping for the day when the searchlights of science would pick out our invisible enemy and give us the power to stop that enemy from making us ill. And now the scientists have done it, and they've used the virus itself to perform a kind of biological jiu-jitsu to turn the virus on itself in the form of a vaccine, and an idea that I think was pioneered in this country by Edward Jenner in 1796. And today we can announce that the government has accepted the recommendation from the Independent Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency to approve the pfizer BioNTech vaccine for distribution across the United Kingdom. After months of clinical trials involving thousands of people to ensure that the vaccine meets the strictest internationally recognised standards of safety, quality and effectiveness. Thanks to the fantastic work of Kate Bingham and the Vaccines Task Force, we've purchased more than 350 million doses of 7 different vaccine candidates, and the UK was the first country in the world to pre-order supplies of this Pfizer vaccine, securing 40 million doses. Through our winter plan, the NHS has been preparing for the biggest programme of mass vaccination in the history of the UK, and that's going to begin next week. And in line with the advice of the Independent Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, the first phase will include care home residents, health and care staff, the elderly and those who are clinically extremely vulnerable. But there are immense logistical challenges. The virus has got to be stored at minus 70 degrees. Each person needs 2 injections 3 weeks apart. So it will inevitably take some months before all the most vulnerable are protected. Long, cold months. So it's all the more vital that as we celebrate this scientific achievement, we're not carried away with over-optimism or fall into the naive belief that the struggle is over. It's not. We've got to stick to our winter plan, a comprehensive programme to suppress the virus, protect the NHS and the vulnerable, keep education and the economy going, and use treatments, testing and vaccines to enable us to return to much closer to normal by the spring. Today, in England, we've ended national restrictions, opening up significant parts of the economy in doing so, but also replacing them with tough tiers to keep this virus down. And I know that those tiers will mean continued hardship for many, and it's going to continue to be tough for some sectors. But until the vaccine is deployed, our plan does rely on all of us continuing to make sacrifices to protect those we love. So please continue to follow the rules where you live. Remember, hands, face, space, and if you live in a Tier 3 area where community testing will be made available, please take part in that community testing. Together, these steps are, for now, the surest way to protect yourselves and those you love. And by reducing the transmission of the virus, help de-escalate your area to a lower level of restrictions as vaccines and testing, as I say, take an ever larger share of the burden. As we do all this, we're no longer resting on the mere hope that we can return to normal next year, in the spring, but rather the sure and certain knowledge that we will succeed and together reclaim our lives and all the things about our lives that we love. So I want to thank the scientists and all those around the world who've taken part in the trials and got us to this stage. And I want to hand over now to Simon Stevens of the NHS.
Thank you and good afternoon. Obviously, as the Prime Minister says, today is a news bringing great optimism. We have a vaccine that has been independently shown to be both safe and effective, but I suspect that what people want are practical answers to three questions. Who will be first in line? When will the vaccines be available? And how will we get it to you from the NHS? So taking those three questions in turn, first of all, in terms of who will be first in line, as the Prime Minister says, the independent medical experts, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, have clearly recommended that the NHS should make sure that the first people to be offered the vaccine are those at highest risk, together with the people who look after them. In practice, what that means is starting with the over 80s, who are at much higher risk of severe outcomes from coronavirus, as well as people in care homes, together with some of the frontline health and social care staff who are looking after them. And then as more vaccine becomes available, we will be, in the new year, extending that to many more people across the country in line with the JCVI recommendations. So that, in turn, helps answer the question when, in that although we are the first health service in the world to be able to get vaccinating, supplies from the manufacturer are phased. So the initial tranche in December is going to enable us to get started, but the bulk of this vaccination programme, either through this vaccine or hopefully others as well that will join it, will take place in the period January through to March or April for the at-risk population. The majority of the early vaccinations will, as I say, be for the over 80s and for care home residents. And since you need 2 jabs with an initial injection and then a booster, typically around 21 days apart, that means that we've got to reserve the second dose for the people who are getting the first dose in December to make sure that that second dose is available for them. And it also means that the people who are getting the first dose in December will not have the full protection from the vaccine until they get the second dose in January, which emphasises the point that we need to continue to be extremely careful during December and into January, and then as the vaccination expands to the wider population. So that's who and that's when. In terms of how, the vaccine that has been approved for the NHS to deploy today, the pfizer BioNTech vaccine, is being independently shown to be medically safe, but it is logistically complicated. We have to move it around the country in a carefully controlled way, initially at minus 70 degrees centigrade or thereabouts, and then there are a limited number of further movements that we are allowed by the regulator to make. It also comes in packs of 975 people's doses, so you can't, at this point, just distribute it to every individual GP surgery or pharmacy, as we normally would for many of the other vaccines available on the NHS. So the phasing of delivery, the way we will do it, is that next week, around 50 hospital hubs across England will start offering the vaccine to the over 80s and to care home staff and others identified by the JCVI. Typically, they may be people who were already down to come into hospital next week for an outpatient appointment. So if you're going to be one of those people next week or in the weeks that follow, the hospital will get in touch with you. You don't need to do anything about it yourself. That will then be followed in the subsequent weeks with GP practices coming together in each area to operate local vaccination centres. And that will grow to over 1,000 places right across England where GPs will be in touch with their at-risk patients, inviting people to come forward for vaccination. We've had an excellent response from GPs across the NHS wanting to participate in this programme, and as the extra vaccine comes available, we'll be able to turn on more of those GP-led clinics. And then if the MHRA, the independent regulator, as we expect they will, give approval for a safe way of splitting these packs of 975 doses, then the good news is that we will be able to start distributing those 2 care homes. And then as even more vaccine becomes available, finally, we will be able to switch on large vaccination centres across the country and indeed invite local community pharmacists, probably at the beginning of January, to begin to offer vaccination as well. So, in a nutshell, this is going to be a phased programme. We, the NHS, your GP or your hospital, the NHS will contact you if you are ready to be offered the vaccination. And today, of course, is a day of great optimism, but for all the reasons I've said, I think it needs to be tempered with realism around phasing. The NHS has got a fantastic track record around vaccine delivery, but this is the first time in the world that these particularly complicated logistics are being put into practice. And finally, I should of course conclude, I think, with a big thank you to not only the scientists and the researchers who have managed to produce this vaccine, but to all of my fellow staff across the health service, the nurses and doctors and the therapists and the paramedics, who are all going to now mobilise for what is the biggest vaccination campaign in our history. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Simon. Jonathan, anything to add?
Thanks, Prime Minister. Yes, I'd like to add a few science reflections, if I may, and begin with the fact to tell you quite openly, and I don't mind telling you, I'm not saying it for effect, the office will tell you it's true, that I was quite emotional this morning when I heard June Rain, Sir Munir Pir Mohammed and Wei Shen Lim lay out how they'd got very meticulously to their conclusions about the Pfizer vaccine. And what a momentous journey and international effort it has been. Discovery by 2 scientists who originally lived in Turkey, development by a German biotech company, involvement of a massive US pharmaceutical giant, and then involvement of our own UK MHRA to bring home the goods in terms of the UK. What a fantastic journey. And I gave you the train analogy many weeks ago now. The train has now slowed down safely. It has now stopped in the station and the doors have opened. That was the authorisation by the MHRA. What we need now is for people to get on that train and travel safely to their destinations. Those destinations are all over the UK. This train is going to stop several times on the way. It's going to have to reach all parts of the UK. There will be trains that come behind it, and that is all going to take time. So everyone needs to be delighted with the news today, but equally patient and realistic about how this rolls out over the next few months. And now some serious science points. Number 1, we have 1 authorised vaccine, but we need more. We're very hopeful we will get some more, but it is still possible that some of the ones in development will fall by the wayside, and you have to be prepared for that. We then need assured supply, and that is a big and difficult ask for manufacturers, and it won't all come at once, and it may stop and start a bit at times. We just have to manage that as best we can as it happens. Number 3, we need people to take it. This vaccine isn't going to help you if you don't take it. And you will need 2 doses of this vaccine and most of the others to have full protection. Watching others take it and hoping that this will then protect you isn't going to work necessarily. We don't know if this vaccine will prevent transmission or any of them. We have to wait for the science to tell us if it will prevent transmission, though we are very hopeful on that point. We also have to be patient to see the real live effects on transmission and hospitalisations and deaths. And until we see that as scientists, we can't then scope what the likely impact is going to be on bringing this pandemic to an early end. And rollout won't be instant. Already on the JCVI Phase 1 list, we have round about 30 million people who are going to be targeted at some point. And even if you gave me 60 million vaccines here in this corner now, in a freezer of course, but if you gave me the 60 million, I couldn't, no system in the world could distribute those really, really quickly in a matter of a few days. So we have to be realistic about how long this is going to take. It's going to take months, not weeks. And for now, the other measures, the tier measures, the social distancing, have to stay in place. If we relax too soon, if we just kind of go, the vaccine's here, let's abandon caution, all you're going to do is create a tidal wave of infections, and this vaccine's then got to work in a headwind to get back ahead of the game, and that will make it harder. And then the final point is that, look, everyone wants social distancing to come to an end. We're fed up with it. Nobody wants lockdowns and to see the damage they do. But if you want that dream to come true as quickly as it can come true, then you have to take the vaccine when it's offered to you. Low uptake will almost certainly make restrictions last longer. And finally, please stick to the guidance until we say it is safe to stop. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Let's go to questions from the public. First, Dylan from Wandsworth.
Thousands of Year 13 students, like myself, across the country have been held in suspense over the last few months over our A-levels. When does the government intend to provide certainty as to what is being planned for next summer?
Right, Dylan, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank everybody who's been in school and the efforts that schools, teachers, pupils have gone to keep our schools going. That's been one of the prime objectives of the way we fought the pandemic here in this country, to make sure kids are in school. Dylan, we're going to be setting out some more tomorrow about exams, but let me just say that we want exams to go ahead. We think they're very important, but we'll also be setting out some ways in which we're going to help pupils to do them next summer, given the exceptional circumstances that the country finds itself in, and given that so many pupils have had their education disrupted by the pandemic. So we'll be setting out a lot more about that tomorrow. Let's go to Catherine from Queniborough. And I'm sorry, Catherine asks, which hospitality tier restrictions remain in place over the Christmas relaxation? Will families be able to socialise in pubs and restaurants, or just in their houses? And I'm sorry to say, Catherine, that we've got to stick with the guidance that we've set out, the tiering system throughout the Christmas period, as Simon was just saying, and Jonathan as well. It would be a really fatal mistake now to respond to this good news by letting the virus run riot again, letting it get out of control by too much transmission over Christmas. And so that's why we've got to stick very tightly to the tiering that we've set out. Let's go to questions from the media. Fergus Walsh, BBC.
Prime Minister, now we have a vaccine. How important is this moment?
Well, Fergus, this is a huge moment, and as JVT, as Jonathan Van Tam was just saying, it's also a very moving thing, and I'm really lost in admiration for science and the ability of scientists to solve human problems in the way that they can. And this is not easy. I mean, bear in mind, we've got a vaccine now for COVID that really works. There's no question that it works. But we haven't got a vaccine for SARS, for MERS, for HIV. There's a huge, fantastic effort has gone into this. And when you consider the damage that, as I was saying earlier, the damage that this virus has done to human life across the planet, the economic damage, the social damage, to say nothing of the cost in life and suffering, it is a fantastic moment. But to repeat the key message, the worst thing now would be to think that this is the moment when we can relax our guard and think that it's game over in the fight against COVID. This is not the end. We have to fight on, and we have to continue with the tough measures that we've announced today. Thanks very much, Fergus. Let's go to Emily Morgan of ITV.
Hello, thank you. A question to you, Prime Minister. Your scientists have said that care home residents should be the first people to get this vaccine. Are you confirming then that they won't be? And if not, aren't you failing to protect our most vulnerable? And if I may, a question to you, Simon Stevens. What are you doing right now to address this logistical challenge to get the vaccine to care homes sooner rather than later?
Well, I think I'll ask Simon to correct me if I've got this wrong, but you're quite right. The issue is, of course we want to get it into care homes to protect the most vulnerable as fast as we possibly can. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation has rightly said that care home residents must be a priority. The difficulty is in distributing the cases to care homes. Each case has 975 vaccines in it, and obviously you want to avoid wastage, and the difficulty is that the MHRA has not yet authorised the people who would be transporting the vaccine to the care homes to be able to effect the division themselves. I know it sounds complicated, Emily, but that's because this vaccine, and JVT also, Jonathan may want to come back on this. This vaccine is it needs to be kept deep frozen, as you know, minus 75. There is a risk that if it is allowed to degenerate by being improperly handled, it simply won't work. So the rules around the transport of this vaccine are extremely important. And to get to your point about speeding this up and making sure we get it into care homes as soon as possible, we're expecting to hear more soon from the MHRA about how that can happen. But I think it would be fair to say that we certainly want to be putting it into the groups that Simon talked about just now: care home residents, care workers, NHS, and above all, those above 80 who are the most vulnerable. Our objective must be to use the vaccine stocks that we have to protect those who are most likely not just to fall ill, but to succumb to the disease. That's what the JCVI has decided, and I think quite rightly. But Jonathan and Simon.
If I may come in, Prime Minister, and say, Emily, I think your remarks about failure are extremely unfair when one considers that a new virus emerged less than 12 months ago and we already have our first vaccine. And Professor Stevens has been very clear that as soon as it is legally and technically possible to get the vaccine into care homes, we will do so. But, you know, this is a complex product with a very fragile cold chain. It's not a yoghurt that can be taken out of the fridge and put back in multiple times. It's really tricky to handle. And so I think, you know, we'll get there as fast as we can is the answer, and we are trying extremely hard.
Simon, anything you want to add on that?
Well, no, I think you've both said it absolutely accurately. I mean, we are raring to go in the NHS. We want to be able to vaccinate people in care homes for COVID, just as we vaccinate care home residents for many other things, including winter flu. Just as soon as we have the regulatory sign-off that we can do that, we can get the jabs to the care homes so that the GPs and the nurses can then arrive and give those care home residents that COVID vaccination, we will do that. And we, at this point, with a fair wind, fully expect that will be in the first tranche of priorities for vaccination during this month.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Emily. Let's go to Beth Rigby of Sky News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We've got two big events today, celebrations about the vaccine, but also unhappiness about the tier system. You've told MPs that current restrictions will expire on February the 3rd. But given that you also said in your COVID winter plan that January and February are traditionally the hardest months for the NHS, the depths of winter, when our hospital wards are under the greatest pressure, should we all still prepare for restrictions to run through to April? And if I may, to Professor Van Tam, 1 in 5 Britons have said in a just released YouGov poll they're not confident about this vaccine. How worried are you that people won't take it? And given that you just said we don't know if it reduces transmission, what percentage of the population would need to take it for it to be effective and us to be able to lift restrictions? Thank you.
Beth, well, first of all, just on the tiering, and yes, of course, I totally accept that that they're tough. These tiers are obviously a huge amount of the economy is opened up, but the restrictions do remain tough, particularly in tier 3 on hospitality, and we deeply regret that. We're doing everything we can to help, but the way forward is not just the steady rollout of the vaccine that and several vaccines we hope that we've been describing over the next few weeks and months, but also using observation of the tiering plus community testing as they have in Liverpool with great success. 284,000 people in Liverpool took part in mass testing, and so local leaders, MPs, everyone can get together to do those community tests and drive and isolate the positives and help the negatives to do things differently, and that way drive the incidence down and get the virus keep the virus under control and come down the tiers. We hope before Easter as well. So that's the tool that we see working in addition to the vaccine.
So, Beth, thanks for the questions. On a vaccine that reduces transmission, that is always the final big win if you can get a vaccine that does that. Because we can't be sure of that yet, and we'll have to wait and see if that is the case with this vaccine, and others to follow. I'm quite optimistic, but far from certain. And because we can't say to what extent the percentage of transmission that is taken out by the vaccine, because it's not binary, it's not kind of it either does or it doesn't, it's a percentage that it will take out. Until we know that and the scientists can model that, we won't be able to say the kind of total population vaccine uptake, the magic number you're after, and understand why you're after it. But we can't give it to you yet. But I don't want to take away from the fact that the not immediate, but quite in the foreground, almost as big win, is stopping people going into hospital with COVID-19, stopping them dying in hospital from COVID-19, and removing that fear that they're going to have to run that risk. And if we can do that, that's much closer in the terms of time to the future, when we'll know those kind of answers. And we already know from the preliminary data from AstraZeneca, as in their press releases, that they had no hospital admissions at all in the group that received the vaccine. So, those kind of things are very encouraging. And if we can get the hospital burden under control, then at that point, and when we're confident it's under control, we can start to think about what the other options are around the edges of getting this country back to normal, which we all want so much. So just kind of stay with us.
Thanks.
Can I just jump in quickly? Promise, just to be clear, do you expect to roll over the tier system on February the 3rd?
Well, we will judge the situation as I told the House yesterday and repeated today on the basis of the data. But I think for the time being, Beth, you've got to take it that tiering is going to be a very, very important part of our campaign against coronavirus, and I think it's absolutely vital that people continue to stick to the guidance and follow the rules. That is completely crucial. Mesa Hall of the Express.
Thank you, Prime Minister. If I could ask the medical experts, first of all, as the vaccine is rolled out and we progress through the priority list, at what stage would you feel it'd be right to lift the majority of the restrictions? Is it a matter of inoculating people in the 70s, 80s who are most at risk, or would you want to see a much greater proportion of the population vaccinated? And Prime Minister, this vaccine has been approved in the UK faster than in EU countries. Is that because we've left the EU? Should we see this as our first Brexit bonus, our first big Brexit bonus? And on the subject of Brexit, the EU is saying that there's now less than 72 hours left to cut a deal. How confident are you that we can get a deal in that time?
So maybe on the first question, and I'm sure JVT wants to come in as well, the goal of the vaccination programme, just like for coronavirus, just like for anything else, is firstly to protect vulnerable individuals. And so the list that, given unfortunately coronavirus strikes very unequally in terms of its impact, and you are at far greater risk if you're over 80 than if you're in your 30s and so forth. That's why it's a graduated list of the most vulnerable people. That will help protect them. And then the second goal is preventing people spreading it unknowingly to others. And as JVT said, we don't at this point know whether this vaccine will have that effect. But that's obviously one of the great benefits that you get from the winter flu jab. It's the benefit you get from the measles, mumps and rubella jab. So there is a good sort of reason for thinking that that might be the case, but we don't definitively know that that's the case as we sit here today.
So, Mesa, all I would add to that is to say that the JCVI priority list, phase 1, which takes us down to people 50 years of age and over, and obviously under the age of 50, if you're in an at-risk group. Taken together, those groups, it's not an accident that they take out, with a very effective vaccine and very high uptake, 99% of COVID-related mortality, deaths in the UK. It is not an accident that that's how JCVI got to the phase 1 priority listing.
Yeah, and Mesa, just on your question about, how come the UK's seeming to get the vaccine soon, early, perhaps ahead of many other countries. I think that's really down to the vaccine task force more than anything else, and the way they've gone out to organise that. But what I would say about this, all these vaccines, all 7 of the ones that the UK is backing, that these are global efforts. You've got scientists around the world coming together to make this possible. And it's a truly international thing, and very, very moving to see it. On Brexit and where we are with the negotiations, well, we remain absolutely committed to trying to get a deal if we can. I think our friends know what the UK bottom line is and what people voted for on June the 23rd, 2016. They voted to take back control. It's about making sure that the UK is able to run its own laws, its own fisheries, and so on. And that's fundamentally what it's all about, and that's what we're all working for. Let's go to Hugo Guy of the Eye.
Thank you, Prime Minister. When you first announced the new tiering system that's come into effect today, you suggested that it was likely to stay in place until the end of March. Given the good news on vaccines recently, is there a chance that that date could change and that the current COVID restrictions could be ended early? And Professor Van Tam, can I ask, there's been a lot of attention on the precise details of the COVID rules recently, but perhaps less attention on the broader principles of how people can protect themselves against COVID and how COVID's transmitted. Are you confident that the public knows enough about the risks of COVID transmission, particularly, for example, issues around ventilation, which it now seems may be more important than other factors that were stressed early in the pandemic?
Yeah, well, Hugo, on your first question, which a lot of colleagues have asked in one way or the other, what difference does this make to the tiering? Well, first thing to say is, for now, it makes absolutely no difference. Absolutely no difference. We've got to focus on keeping the virus under control, getting it down, tough tiering, mass community testing, as I've described. But clearly, as we go on in the next weeks and months, and hopefully we're able to use testing and the vaccine to drive it down. I suppose there will come a moment when as the graph of people fed up with graphs, but if you imagine the graph of immunised, vaccinated, inoculated people going up one way, then there will come a moment when we're able, obviously, to start to relax the non-pharmaceutical interventions, all the things that drive us, that are so difficult, we'll be able steadily, we hope, to take those off, just as community testing we hope will allow areas to come down the tiering scales. But we're not there yet, Hugo, and I've got to stress that. This is theoretical. We've got to wait and see how fast we can vaccinate people. It's weeks, months of work to go before we're in that situation, alas. But thank goodness we now have a vaccine to work with.
So thank you, Hugo. On the point about ventilation, I think you make a very good point indeed. And it's not just because I have some Far Eastern origins. I'm a great admirer of the Japanese system of looking for risk for transmission of COVID, the 3 Cs, to which I add myself, D and V. The first C, look for closed spaces, often ones with low ventilation. They are risk areas. The second C, look for situations where there's going to be crowding or where you can't avoid crowding. The third C, look for situations where close contact, particularly indoors, is likely to happen. And then finally, on top of all that, think about how long you're going to be in those situations, D, duration. And then finally, on top of that, think V, volume, how loud and noisy is it going to be, with people shouting, with raised voices, singing, etc., in those kind of closed, low ventilation spaces. These are all recipes for transmission. I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Hugo. Let's go to Harry Cole. Lastly, Harry Cole of The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. A question for Professor Van Tam. I know you can't give us a magical number of how many people will need to be vaccinated before we can begin to lift some measures, but can you envisage a world, perhaps in the winter, a new normal where masks and hand sanitizer just become part of everyday life? And Prime Minister, I don't think I heard you give a direct answer to Mace's question there. Is this a Brexit bonus? Have we beaten the world to this because we're free from Brussels? And are you concerned that 70 of your MPs were unable to back you last night? And aren't you staring at a defeat in February? Or what are you going to do to win over your own party on your tier system, given they're in open mutiny?
Well, JBT, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. So, Harry, to your question, I'll answer it in kind of 3 chunks, if I may. Number 1, I don't think we're going to eradicate coronavirus ever. I think it's going to be with humankind forever. Secondly, I think we may get to a point where coronavirus becomes a seasonal problem. I don't want to draw too many parallels with flu, but possibly that is the kind of way we would learn to live with it. And the third point is, do I think there will come a big moment where we kind of, have a massive party and throw on masks and hand sanitizer and say that's it, it's behind us, like the end of the war? No, I don't. I think those kind of habits that we've learnt from that clearly stop the spread of other respiratory viruses, such as flu, will perhaps persist for many years, and that may be a good thing if they do.
Yes, it may be a good thing, or on the other hand, we may want to get back to life was pretty much close to normal. But anyway, I have high hopes that eventually the vaccine will make a very, very significant difference to the way we live our lives. But Harry, on your point about why we're lucky enough to be in the position on vaccines. Again, I'm going to exercise a self-denying audience my fabled diplomacy and tact, and just say I think that this is something that has been we've been working on. The NHS has been working on for a long time. The vaccine task force, many people have been working on this very hard for a long time. And I pay tribute to all of them. And as for what might happen in future decisions of the House of Commons on where we should go in the tiers, I totally understand people's frustrations with the tiering system. I understand people who feel frustrated because they feel they're in the wrong tier. They've been attracted into a too high a tier by proximity to some neighbourhood that has higher incidence of infection. I know how people feel about it. It's incredibly frustrating. What we are going to do, and I said this many times today and yesterday, we're going to make sure that we are as local and as sensitive as we can possibly be to local achievement and local incidence of the disease. But don't forget, the thing I keep saying is that there is this opportunity with mass community testing for people to acquire agency in this and to get a test, squeeze the disease, kick COVID out even before the vaccine comes.
So Harry, I'd like to come back because I do like to be challenged when I have perhaps not made myself clear, and the Prime Minister has picked me up on this occasion, and it's quite all right in public.
I didn't mean to challenge you.
No, but it's quite all right because it gives me a chance to clarify what I mean here. I do not think the government will continue to have to recommend social distancing, masks and hand sanitizer forever and a day. I hope we will get back to a much more normal world. But the point I was trying to make was, do I think possibly some of those personal habits for some people will persist longer and perhaps become enduring for some people? Yes, I think that's possible.
As in the Far East?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows? Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes the session for today. Thanks, Harry.